Welcome to Politica Show on Lions Wire. Today, our guest is Ilya Levkov, and we are going to talk about latest news from Israel, particularly, unfortunately, the death of very well-known political dissident Eduard Kuznetsov. And Ilya knows him very well. He was part of his release process. He advocated for him, and I'm going to ask Ilya to tell us the story.
Yeah, actually, there is a photo where there was the press. Press was enormous, covering the exchange. You see, Kuznetsov and Dimshitz have been traded for together with a two Ukrainian priests and one Georgian, I think. They were traded in April 1979. At that point, I was the political director of the National Conference on Soviet Jewry, and there was enormous interest. The largest, I would say, protest for the release of Soviet dissident was there when Kuznetsov, Dimshitz, and his ex-wife Silva Zalmanson appeared. There were 250,000 crowd at the UN Plaza, and I have it all in pictures together. I think one pictures you have it. I don't remember what is in there, but it's the autograph of Henry Jackson, with whom I also, in my position, had contacts with.
The autograph is dated 28/10/1979 and signed Eduard Kuznetsov.
8, it could be August. In Europe, they write first the day rather than the month, you know.
Right.
The opposite what we do. So this was in August. That is because he came back later on. I didn't have this picture when it was taken. He flew back, and then he.
So Ilya, in few words, what was the story of Eduard Kuznetsov? Why did he become who he became?
The story was that Russian Jews didn't want to accept the suggestion of the Israeli special office concerning the Soviet Jews, and decided to hijack. But it's not a correct word, hijack, because it was the aeroplane which they selected. It was, oldie biplane type, and it had to fly to some close place, and therefore the operation was nicknamed the wedding. This is a group was flying for the wedding of their friends.
And they were not going to go straight to Israel. They were going to take it to Europe, somewhere nearby.
No, they had to fly. They had to cross Finland, because if they would have been landed there, they would be given back to the Soviet authorities. Only they had to cross Finland, the bay, and land in Sweden. Only then they could have. But they felt that they've been followed up by the KGB. There was also a guy who broke during interrogation and spilled the beans. And they knew that the chances of taking, and they did not hijack because the aeroplane was on the ground. There were no other passenger in it. The pilot, they took the pilot, tied his hand and legs, covered him with a blanket, gave him water for the night to drink, and then they had Kuznetsov and and another, I just forgot his name, mentioned it before, and pilot who was once in
Dimshits.
the Dimshits, yes, Mark Dimshits, and this way he would fly them there. But before they entered the aeroplane, they were arrested. You understand? So you could not, and they actually finally they were not tried for hijacking because they didn't hijack a thing, but they were in a process of stealing in a large quantity of a Soviet property, i.e. the aeroplane.
Right. And what's interesting is that both Dimshits and Kuznetsov, they knew that they would be arrested. They knew that the person from their circle spilled the beans to KGB, and KGB was following them.
Yes.
So it was more of an intended sort of statement that they wanted to
Correct.
make than...
At the end, it was an end variation. At the beginning, they hoped that they could take off. But as the things have developed, they realized that they will be arrested. But still, they decided to blow a bonfire about it, you see. And I was in the midst of this bonfire. It was in the summer of 1970. What did happen? What happened is that the American jury was not engaged to support actively against the Soviet regime to release Soviet Jews. Therefore, they decided to reawaken, so-called, this movement to bypass the establishment, that is major organizations, and they said also the American, they were not ready to be drafted or volunteered for inside political action, because in 1970, this was the time when the American jury suddenly discovered that there was a Holocaust and they did not take part in it, to prevent it or somehow. Now we have tons of books about this. So in order to bypass them, the head of the office, I always forget it. I always forget the Hebrew name. Yeah, actually sent one of the Soviet dissident, Dr. Norman Sirkin, a distant relative of the Zionist Sirkin, I was there at Columbia University PhD program, and he said, listen, here you have 10, 20 cities, fly around and appear before the Jews in synagogues, bypassing the big shots.
Yeah.
In this way, we rekindled the fire. In many, I remember I was in Tennessee, I was in Texas, Dallas, Texas, even they show me that book depository from which Oswald shot. We were, Louisiana, Florida. I don't remember all. I remember also that I was in Canada. And in Canada, I it was in the house of this Bronfman, the grandfather of the present. No, after him was Lauder. There were Bronfman, then Bronfman the son of Bronfman, and then another son of the son of Bronfman. And it was, I remember precisely, it was on Thanksgiving Day, and there was no Thanksgiving in Canada. They have instead Thanksgiving, a Boxer Day, I think. So, and there I met Ezer Weizmann, who later on who is a nephew of the President Weizmann, and who later on became the President of Israel. And it was Ezer Weizmann who, in a way, prepared the Israeli attack against Egyptian Air Force and left the office as the chief of staff and gave it to Yitzhak Rabin, who didn't have to do anything. Everything was already oil tested and all that. And despite this, he was in shock for 2-3 days when the 6-day war began. And when it was known that after 2.5 hours, there were no Egyptian Air Force, the same thing happened with the Air Force of Jordan and Syria. So why he was in a shock, I do not understand, because after all, Israel initiated this attack. But I'm wearing too far, just pictures are running. I close my eyes and I can see the events that took place.
So going back,
it was successful. Listen, it was successful. Why was it successful? Yes, the Amcha, simply American Jews, were joined on this event, on this idea to protest, demand, and all those things. However, this was not limited only with those protests. There was a verdict in December 70 was the verdict, and the verdict was death to Kuznetsov and
Dimshutz.
So then we once again went out and protested throughout. Yeah, it must have been because it was already, as I said, it was the tour around the United States. It took places, I remember, from end of the summer through Thanksgiving. And that is, well, let's say September, October, November, 3 months, at least, or 3.5 months. So at this point, there was still a verdict. And then somebody, I know that somebody was, his name was Yitzhak Rager. He was the consul in charge of this issue in New York Israeli consulate. And the story goes, said Golda Meir summoned him and says, listen, here is a mission for you. Just don't ask questions. Go to Spain. Ask for meeting with Franco, the General Franco, the fascist Franco, and tell him that we know he's once from the Marranos, several hundred years ago. And then tell him, please release the verdict or commute the verdict that was given against terrorists who shot 2 Spanish police officers. He said, just don't go into the explanation and all that. Tell him, do it. He went, he asked, Franco agreed, and he commuted their death sentence of those terrorists to life in prison. Now, here the story begins, because it has to be exposed. And that is, with this notion, there was a campaign throughout United States and the rest, at which called, and at that point, Dimshits were awaiting the execution of the dissident. So there was a campaign, worldwide campaign, which said, how come the fascist Franco commutes 2 terrorists for shooting a policeman, but Leonid Brezhnev does not commute 2 people that didn't do or didn't kill or didn't wound anyone. You understand? And as they say in Brooklyn, it worked. And therefore, this is how they were commuted, exchange, and that I told you, my professor Zbigniew Brzezinski made a trade for caught 2 Soviet spies for those 5 people. Among 5 people, of course, Brzezinski didn't do only the Dimshits, demanded Dimshits and Kuznetsov. He also asked for a priest from Ukrainian, a dissident of Ukrainian, and to best of my memory, somebody from Georgia, some dissident. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so then this, which caused to be the it was what do I say? A deal, a trade between those 5 Soviet dissidents, including Dimshits and Kuznetsov, 2 spies that were caught spying in New Jersey. As a matter, once again, I sidetracked. I met the daughter, the FBI agent who really caught those 2 Soviet spies. He wrote a book, and he passed away. And I met his daughter, and somewhere it might be a book. The book will be in English, but maybe we will deal and make the Russian version of that book, how those 2 Soviet spies were caught and how it did give a push to the liberation of Soviet Jews and the remaining Russians, because this was a spark. It was a political spark that started it all. So during those years, I was in close contact with Eduard Kuznetsov, met in Israel numerous times, we met in New York. I remember actually I was present at the initial deal of publication in English of that book, Kuznetsov, Prison Diaries. I simply was present there in that room.
You published Prison Diaries, right?
And I published them in English, yes.
In English.
I took the original, and it was a very, very lousy translations, and was done very, very fast. And therefore I had to edit it. And therefore it's a much better translation than the original one. Not translation, it was English and English.
Mm-hmm. Ilya, going back to the release, story of release of Kuznetsov.
Yeah.
Kuznetsov did not know, the rumor has it, that he was being released actually up to the last moment. Do you know how he found out?
No, they did not know. They found out in a way when they landed in New York, because they received a new pants, jackets, and all that thing. So it was obvious that they are being moved to some Western countries, a trade. They realized, they deducted from that thing, but they didn't know
They were
where.
not told. I've heard that when they came to his prison cell and asked him to pack his belongings, he actually believed that this is the day when he's gonna lose his life.
Yeah, yes and no, because what they call it, in Russian, similar procedure when they come to a prison cell and they ask, get out. And he asked, с вещами или без? That is, with all your belongings or without it. Since they ask, take your belongings, it was obvious that it will not be an execution.
I see.
And besides this, it was already, he was in prison. He describes it in the books, how the life went in prison. And there was one more, as a matter of fact, a byproduct. Very few people know there was another byproduct, i.e., in Lithuania, a Jewish activist, Levinstein, no, I don't remember now, was composing what is called an activist of Helsinki Act. There were Helsinki Agreement with the Soviet Union, there was a military basket, there was an economic basket, and there were human rights. Now, everybody made fun of this human rights because the Soviets, so they agreed to set up a human rights, freedom, and all that, but they didn't do a thing. However, it gave a push to various committees in Russia, in the Soviet Union, demanded those points to which the Soviet Union agreed about this human rights. Now, in this procedure, there was also in process a committee which in Lithuania, and these Jewish activists wanted to draft Thomas Venslova. No, not Venslova. Once again, I know him and personally, and now I forgot. In a very, very prominent Lithuanian activist who was told that he can go to the West. And they asked, and he was very prominent because his father was Minister of Culture of Lithuania. And he was, in a way, had a clash with his father because he was a dissident. And there he didn't want to start again in Lithuania with all that stuff. He was on the edge of leaving Lithuania. So this Jewish activist said, you know what? Don't give me an answer now. Here is a book by Eduard Kuznetsov. Read it, let's talk tomorrow. The fellow, not Venslova, I just don't remember. Thomas, he was a professor of Russian literature at Yale for some 25 years.
Okay.
And in any case, he read the book. He was so taken that he said, all right, I am ready to set up a Lithuanian committee for human rights that appears in Helsinki Charter, And this is how, let me give you a couple more steps forward that few people know, if at all. And this gave the push to Lithuanians. Lithuanians were the most active nation that demanded freedom from Gorbachev, later on, 20 years later.
Yep.
And what did they demand? They wanted freedom, but besides this, they also created a split by themselves from the Soviet Union. What do you think? Well, nobody can guess it. They left the Soviet organization, which was called WAP. WAP, it was kind of a union of writers, and this organization was selling the uh, publication rights of Soviet authors to people abroad, India, Latin America, West Europe, all those Soviet offices that functioned and published this literature.
Yeah.
So Lithuanian came and said, you know what? We don't need Moscow to present the rights of our Lithuanian authors to other countries. So we want out of this organization, and we will have a lit up Lithuanian committee for copyrights, And this was the first slip that really gave a push to Lithuania. That was another push for Lithuania, which I contributed personally. And in 1989, I came to Moscow for the first time, to Russia in a way, and for the book fair. And among my books was the one book that I published. This was translation from English into Russian of Tom Clancy's The Hunt for Red October. The Hunt for Red October hero is the captain, who is half Russian and half Lithuanian. And he steals, and he's a captain #1 of the Soviet Union. And he steals the newest submarine and dropped a note to the admiral, a letter. I'm gone. Try to catch me. You understand?
Yeah, and there was famous movie made on that book.
That's right. And by the way, how did it start? You know the movie? At the beginning, he had a politruk, he had a representative of the party. And that representative of the party, of course, could not be converted because officers, they knew about the plan of this captain to escape, but not the
Politruk.
political officer. So the captain, Ramius, I changed his name, by the way. It was Ramius.
Ramius. That was
original. They had Marco, and I changed it. I told Tom, said there is no Lithuanian Marco. It could be Ukrainian, but not Lithuanian. Never mind. So what happened? So the captain was half Russian and half Lithuanian. And his role played by Sean Connery. The first time the symbol of anti-communist, the symbol of the West, the daring this, played the role of the Soviet commander of this US submarine who wants to escape. That is one. And B, it gave a push. I know that they invited me to visit for one day Vilnius, and I came, and they were so thrilled that I gave the name and changed it even to Lithuanian names. I called him Ramius instead of Marco.
Yeah.
And all this together, this was 89. Yeah, it was already movement of Lithuanian independence, but they were so inspired, so it was this, in the story, this was a Lithuanian fellow. Because nobody in America, there's only one place where in America in the 30s, the word Lithuanian appears in a prominent song, which was, trumpeter. What's the name of the most famous trumpeter in the United States. Big round face with huge cheeks. In any case, the song had its lyrics, let's fall in love. So one of the kind calls to let's fall in love. He says, various people do it, bees do it, even Lithuanians do it. You know, this is how the name of Lithuania was introduced to American public in the 30s.
Ilya, Eduard Kuznetsov, he survived by his daughter.
Yes, I know Anat very, very well. We appeared on TV. I provided her with many pictures, and she made a movie as her mother and she returning to Riga, where she sat in prison, you know. And also there will be, it was a documentary movie, received prizes. As a matter of fact, you would not believe it. What on the back of this poster? Let me see if I can show you. Or maybe I will send you, okay?
Yeah, you'll send it.
It is a poster of Anat, of Anat's documentary.
Wow. Okay.
Simply use it to put on the other side my posters. You understand how close we are?
Got it. And Anat lives in Israel, obviously.
Yes, Anat lives in Israel. Yeah, they moved after Kuznetsov's wife, Larissa Gerstein, passed away about half a year or three-quarters of a year. I visited her several months before that. I have a recording of her singing that she performed for me and my brother, who doesn't speak Russian and could not understand. But he was, my brother Menachem was highly touched and impressed by this daring woman. So she has a daughter of her own in her first marriage. Eduard has had Anat, and that's all what is remained.
Got it. Got it. Fascinating story, Ilya.
Yes, I think so too. I hope I was cogent enough because it's all the ramification, jumping in and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was his story was a big deal. And
yes.
it was
So
followed.
Hear what I said. Listen, this is what I wrote. These diaries should be read and reread by every generation as a part of the Haggadah.
Wow.
My life.
Very relevant. Yeah. Exodus. It was an Exodus.
Yes.
From Egypt of sorts.
That's Egypt was a summer camp.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Ilya. Very, very interesting.